Hello, hello. Nice people are still coming in. It's 1 o'clock. Nice to see you. For me, it's midday, but I know it's morning for many of you. So welcome. It's photobook time. My name is Johannes Romppanen, and I'm here today, not only representing Aalto University, but also photobooks from Finland. At Aalto, I'm currently doing my master in art and media, majoring in photography. And then a few words about photobooks from Finland. It's we organize different kind of projects to engage kind of the photobook community. So locally, currently I'm hosting the Photobook Club Helsinki. It's a meeting once a month where we meet up with photobook readers, and then internationally I'm working on um, this talk series which we started last year, and now this is our second edition. But yeah, so I'm really interested in dialogue, and that's all for me also why I'm so happy to be here and see the people dropping into the talk now. When I started my studies in Aalto, I was really curious to get to know more about the research aspect of the photo book field. And for me, I like to engage in discussions much more than go deep into books. So this was for me a good way to learn, and I feel it's been really nice to see how it's also engaging the community in a more broader perspective as well. But yeah, so this year we're partnering together with bookRoom and Reflektor. Maybe I'll first give the word to Emmanuel and maybe say a few words about bookRoom.
Yes, good morning or good afternoon. From London. I feel I'm doing the Eurovision. So yes, I'm a co-founder of bookRoom that started maybe 15 years ago, or no, even before, 2009. Before the explosion of the photo book, actually, that was just before that. So bookRoom is an experimental research and publishing platform within the School of Fine Art and Photography at University for the Creative Arts in Farnham in the UK. And we engage with editorial, curatorial, critical research through a number of interrelated activities. So we have bookRoom Press, where we do publishing, both of artist book, photo book, and critical surveys, and symposiums and other public events like this one. So it's great to be involved in this one. And really with the aim of, pushing in a way the dialogues beyond academia, and to really bring together artists and academics and thinkers and makers and designers, everybody who's involved in some aspect of either artist books or photo books. So for the past 15 years, we really surveyed, among other things, the parallel histories and practices of the artist book and of the photo book, always acknowledging the kind of publications and works that try to operate on the critical edge of more mainstream publishing or media and conventional publishing, and the respective gatekeepers in a way, which is a bit the tradition of the artist book from the 1950s, 60s. So yes, and seeing how that has impacted the photo book. So some of our survey publications are freely available online. I will put the link in the chat in a bit. The Codex, Paper, Ink, Pixel and Screen from bookRoom Press in 2015. The Book is Alive from 2013. And you can check our website, which is an archive of all projects. And we're involved in research and PhDs. So I know you had Matt Johnston who spoke. last series, and who did a PhD with bookRoom with me, and published this great book called Photobook and through him I was introduced to Emma Lambert, who's currently doing great research on the photobook, and I won't say anything about it. I'll leave it up to her. So it's really, bookRoom is really about looking at not just what the photobook is and how we can make them and crafts and materiality, but much more about what the photo can do and can be used for. That's where I will stop.
Thank you very much. Brenny, would you say a few words about Reflektor?
Yes, happy to. Yeah, my name is Frini Hockenjos, and I'm part of Reflektor, which is a platform for the promotion of photo books and mostly self-published photo books. Like, it helps self-published photo books to be visible and accessible more. Because as a non-profit organization, we go to fairs, both national and international, and together we also organize events like panel discussions, and we have this regular photo book breakfast taking place. So actually, Saturday mornings is a good Reflektor time. It's the classical photo book breakfast time to also do something quite different from the regular evening events, and it's been quite successful. And Thomas is also part of Reflektor, and so is Johannes with a beautiful book that he wrote. It's both it's actually both photographers and photo book enthusiasts of all kinds of whether curating or academics, researchers. Did I forget anything, Thomas? Okay, thumbs up. I guess not. I just saw that Nikita Gavrilenko is also in the audience, and I just wanted to say thank you so much for the great graphic design that you created for us. This is really fun to have such a nice visual to spread. So that's cool, and I'm also really excited to hear the talk today by Emma Lambert. Thank you.
Yeah, it was good you mentioned. So the people who just presented are being part of planning now the talks, and then Nikita was working on our beautiful design for this event, and also the event before. So really happy to have him on board. And then there are also two classmates, Johanna and Alexi, who's been helping basically with communications. A bit of housekeeping before we get on with Emma's talk. As you already probably noticed, we're recording this event. The idea is then to share the talks afterwards for you and for the wider public. I'm gonna put a link at in a while where you're able to put down your contact information if you want to receive, then also the link of the when the talks are online, and then we'll inform also that's a channel where to inform for future talks. The setup today will be first Emma Lambert will have a presentation around 45 minutes maybe, and then after that the floor is open for a public discussion, and we really hope to engage as many of you, and really want this to be kind of like a campfire feeling, that there is that we're kind of together in this space, and that there's really a low threshold of bringing your thoughts. There's no kind of no bad questions, and I think everything is welcome. If you don't feel comfortable with then raising your voice and having your video visible, then just tap in your questions and thoughts on the chat, and we'll pick it from there. There's no problem. And yeah, I think the chat is now a good place to while Emma is talking to have, if you have any questions. But yes, let's go on with. I feel I'm just rambling, but there was important things to say. Let's continue with Emma. Emma Lambert. I'm really happy. As Emmanuel said, the contact came through her, and really happy to have you on board today. Please.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting me to come on. Let me just get my screen set up now. Just make sure. All right then. Okay, yeah. So hello everybody. Thank you for coming along this morning, and to Johannes and Reflektor for inviting me, for Emmanuel for recommending me as well. So as Emmanuel said, I'm doing a PhD with her at UC in Finland. So much of what I'm going to talk about today is focused around what I'm doing with that, and the practice and the research that's kind of emerging through that. I started it in 2020. So I'm kind of nearing the latter end of it now. So things are still coming together. There's still a lot of things that I'm trying to kind of articulate. So it might mean that some of the things maybe I don't kind of quite fully articulate today. But if you have any kind of questions on that, then please, bring them up at the end, and it'll help me also then try and articulate what it is that I'm trying to kind of explore and talk about. So the title of my talk, Where Are You a Local? That kind of might seem a little bit cryptic initially when this is a talk series about photo books. But it will become clear as I go through kind of what that question, why I've posed that question as a part of this this talk here today. Let me just get this. Okay. So I've structured this talk around different areas of my practice and research to give you a little bit of an insight. And hopefully I think it will be a really nice kind of segue on from José's talk on Wednesday, where we explored a lot more around the photo book canons, a lot of the really kind of traditional histories of photo book exploration and discussion. And I think specifically the discussion that happened at the end, where it started to turn towards talking about the accessibility of the book and what that is and what that could be. I think hopefully this is going to feed into those kind of discussions and expand those discussions a little bit more. So I'm going to start with a little bit of background about me, how I've ended up here talking about this kind of research and why I'm interested in it. Then some insight into the practice itself. So the PhD that I'm doing is specifically by practice. And then introducing some of the areas that are really shaping the research that I've really found kind of really enlivening over the last few years. Having Emmanuel as a supervisor, along with Jeremiah, who I've had in previous years, and Dominic, who is my other second supervisor at the moment. The kind of conversations that we have during our supervisions really kind of enliven and inspire the kind of concepts that I'm starting to come through and come up with at the moment. So that's the structure of the talk, and we'll kind of move through it like that. So to understand a little bit about me, to start with, I think it's always interesting. I always find it interesting to kind of understand how people have arrived at a particular place in their practice or their research. So I like to kind of delve a little bit in, you know, what were the kind of threads that brought you to this place. So I thought I'd give you a little bit of that in relation to me to start with. So I'm a photographer, and I've also been teaching photography for the last 18 years or so. One of the projects that I worked on for a long time was between 2007 and 2017, was called Around Here. And it was a long-term documentary project. And I was photographing the village that I grew up in. I hadn't lived in that village for quite a while. My parents still lived there. But I was quite intrigued by the connection that I still have with that village. And the idea for this project came from being asked just the question that everybody asks, so where are you from? And I always had difficulty answering that question because I was living in Birmingham at the time, where I live now. But I would say I grew up in Devon, but I wasn't born in Devon. So this question of where you were from really started to resonate with me, and I started to think about how I would kind of respond to that in a photographic sense. So I started to photograph this village in terms of its people, its communities, the village structures, and I really started to explore this sense that I felt like a local in this village still, even though I hadn't lived there for about half of my life or so. So this is where this term local is starting to filter in a little bit. So I made the project when it came towards its end, and I'd started teaching at Coventry, working with Matt, being exposed to a lot more around the photo book. So I made the project into a photo book. It was just a dummy book. It didn't get published, but it was a real exploration for me into the process of making books, of all the general, all of the sequencing, the editing, but also the actual process of the making of the book that I started to get really interested in. I was also doing lots of talks and writing about this concept of locality and photographing locality, and how that kind of was feeding into me as a practitioner. And then separate to that, in 2016, Matt and I started a little publishing lean-to, as we called it at the time, what couldn't even be considered a publishing house, which we called 481632. And this was a way to try and within the university, within the kind of walls of the university, connect with other people in other departments, in other areas of the university, and find ways to use publishing and making of little publications to share their ideas and share these kind of questions and creative responses that staff and students were having to whatever their current kind of interests and ideas. So we made these little publications. They were kind of restricted in terms of number of pages, so 4, 8, 16 or 32, and we did it on very cheap, just the university printers. There was nothing kind of overly kind of expensive at all with these books, but the key thing was that we were making these books with those people. We were talking through the process of the designing, the idea, the editing with them as a way to kind of understand and explore what they were trying to do with these, with their ideas and questions. So it's the first foray for me really to work in this way with somebody else, thinking about publishing something, but working with somebody else in a very particular way during that process. So it also started to help me think about how publishing could be developed as an educational tool, the kind of questions we can take from publishing or use with publishing to work with students to get them to think about those kind of ideas and what that brings. And then much more recently, this year, Matt and I have started the Book as a kind of longitudinal project where we are using different ways of thinking about the book and the role that the book has in the times of the screen. So back in February, we did our first event for over 3 days, which was very much focused on the library collection of photo-books, and we curated collections from the library collection. The library at Coventry has a really extensive and really wonderful collection of photo-books, so we really wanted to find a way to get access, give a different access point to those photo-books. So we curated this event, and we had some talks from photo-book practitioners, and we had some workshops as well, all to kind of explore the photo book and what the book can be. And we've currently got a second iteration of that exhibited at the moment at Coventry, where we've extended that, but we're doing it as the book as process. So we're really kind of exploring the process behind makings of books. And we've kind of curated a collection of books that talk about books. We've currently got a little exhibition where we're exploring the student books that we've had at the university over the last 10 years. Yeah, so that's a kind of sense of all these kind of different layers and elements that have brought together my interests and where I've ended up becoming really interested in what photo books can do. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time now introducing my practice, and the practice is as a part of the PhD, I launched a book press, which I'm going to introduce in a second. But I started the PhD back in 2020, and at the time when I started it, I didn't have any idea about what the practice was going to be. I just had a very kind of clear idea of the connections that I wanted to make with the photo book, with which I'm going to introduce in a second. So Silvergrass Press is my imprint. It's a very small publishing imprint, but that is the whole kind of shape of my practice for the PhD, the imprint itself, and what I'm able to do as a part of it is kind of publishing photo books. So this was my starting point for my thoughts around my PhD practice, research and practice. Whilst I was teaching at Coventry, I had a lot of exposure to thinking about photo book publishing, as I've just talked about, working with Matt, but also working with practitioners who are involved in socially engaged practice. And at the time, and a lot of the discourse seems to still support this, is that these are very separate areas of practice within photo book kind of practitioners and making, and they've never really been connected in any way, in any kind of substantial way. And I felt that there was something, there was some potential in there that was maybe missing. That there's something at the intersection of these two areas of practice that could be quite significant in terms of understanding what photo books are, what they could be, and also kind of thinking about socially engaged practice. Is there ways of thinking about publishing within socially engaged practice? So the photo book as an art object and as an artistic practice is really well established. We heard from José on Wednesday the other day about the photo book canons, particularly Jerry Badger and Martin Parr's photo book histories book series. It's very well established, in understanding these histories and all of the different ways in which photo books can kind of be considered in terms of an art object. And the concept of art publishing as artistic practice is also well established with the work of Annette Gilbert and Delphine Bedell as well, thinking about how publishing itself is something, can be something more than simply a way of sharing other areas of practice. The publishing process itself is a practice in and of itself. So these ideas are there. These are well documented. These are well understood. But I started to think, is there another way of thinking about what photo books could be? Is there a way to consider the photo book as a social object? As a way to think about it with a different set of values that is maybe away from something that has a commercial value or a very particular kind of artistic value. And then is there also a way to think of publishing as a social practice, not simply an outlet for artistic practice? So it was this intersection between the two where I found that there was something I could really explore. I could really investigate and think about what this relevance was. And I think this was also influenced at the time, because it was around 2020 at the time that Matt was was finishing up his PhD at that time. And so a lot of his ideas around the reading ecology, about his work and the way that he approaches his thoughts about the photo book was also kind of filtering in to the things that I've been thinking about. So the main question that I'm working with my PhD is, how can independent photo book publishing be considered a form of social art practice? So it's not just thinking about the photo book, but very specifically the process of publishing, both the making and the making public of books, and where there is opportunity to recognize in the places that already exist, and as well as opportunity to develop spaces in which photo books can be used in a social space, in a way to kind of engage in the values that are already very kind of understood within socially engaged practice. So Silvergrass Press launched in 2021. So that was the end of my first year of my PhD. And I launched it as a way to allow me to experiment with ideas around publishing, about exploring different ways of what a social practice of publishing could be and what that might look like. So to do that, I developed a manifesto of sorts that helped to kind of shape in kind of a structured way, shape what it was that I was really trying to think about and do with the practice itself. So I suggested that photo books are social objects in both production and dissemination, and that they're a conduit for change. And this concept of social object, I'm going to come to in a little bit. It's come from a very particular bit of research that I found. But there's something in both the production and the dissemination that has very good potential to have this kind of social element added to it. They also create opportunities for people to learn about themselves and others through making. There's some very traditional, in the more mainstream publishing of photo book publishing, there's some very kind of set formulas and formats of how publishing happens. But are there opportunities within that, or are there opportunities that can be created for people to learn about themselves or learn about others, whether that's through the content of the work, whether that's through the making of the actual book? And there is, all publishing, whether that's photo book related or others, has there is collaboration inherent in what publishing is. So publishing in the one sense kind of embodies collaborative practices but collaboration also comes in very different forms. So I think through this research, one of my specific focuses is to kind of define what form of collaboration it is that I'm working within or that I'm interested in thinking about. So photobooks also have the ability to generate conversation. We're having a conversation this morning, but also generate conversation and exchange through that hand-mind connection. As makers, we're handling the books. As readers, we're handling those books and thinking about what we're looking at. So there's something about this kind of hand and mind and the way in which they influence how we learn or what we think about that I think is really important. So after launching the press and constructing my manifesto, I have now embarked on a few publishing experiments where I've gathered different groups of people to explore different kind of strategies of collaboration through publishing, through both the making and the making public of photo books. So far I have published 3 books. The first in 2022, the most recent was just last year. I'm not going to explain them too much at the moment. I'm going to go into that more later in terms of the process of what this collaboration has looked like. I'm going to explore that a little later on. Before I do go on further, something that I really wanted to highlight now was this question of where are you a local? So you'll notice all 3 of the publications, their title is Where Are You a Local? And I just want to explain a little bit about where that's come from. So I've introduced my kind of photographic practice and some of the research areas that I've had over the years, this idea of the local and what local is. So when I launched the publication when I launched Silvergrass Press in 2021, I also needed to kind of think about what my first publication was going to be. So to keep it connected with me, I came up with the question, where are you a local? So it connected in with my own interests as a photographer. It kept it something familiar to me, which was kind of important in terms of partly logistically, in terms of finding a way through a kind of process of making, but then also just important to me kind of personally to work on projects that I'm interested in. So the first book, which was the one that was published in 2022, was launched through this open call that I did. It was a quite small open call that I did through Instagram and also kind of through other contacts. And I asked people to submit work and ideas, so photographs, text, anything that they wanted really, in response to this question, where are you a local? And so this is kind of where this whole project has come from. Initially, this was just going to be the first publication for Silvergrass Press. I had no concept that this would then carry on, that this would then actually form the whole kind of part of the of Silvergrass Press and of the publishing project. But I think the way in which people engaged with the question and the collaboration really made me realize how relevant this question is, particularly in the current climate in which we live. It's a question that can be accessible to anyone to kind of answer, and you can answer it on many different kind of levels. But the concept of locality is kind of really changing. And I specifically frame this around, rather than asking where you're from, ask where are you a local? And there's a shift, there's a potential shift in your mind about what is the difference between the two. So then to kind of think more closely about, okay, what does local mean? So I kind of wanted this question to kind of push people away from thinking about where are you local as being the place that you were born, or a postcode or a place on the map, to pushing it beyond that, to think about these kind of, in terms of possibly like the nuances of everyday life, the experiences that you have, the rituals that you go through, the people that you see on a day-to-day basis. You know, what kind of things shape your everyday, rather than it simply being about, you know, a kind of map coordinate. What is it within those places that make you feel like you're a local, and why is that such a kind of draw for us to make us feel local somewhere or somehow? So yeah, all of those kind of connections with this, it made me realize the relevance of this whole project, that it could go much further. So all of the publications that I have done and will do in the future will be around this question, where are you a local? So something I've been doing alongside the making the publications is, when I've done talks or workshops, I've also asked people who are there, who are participants, to also think about that for themselves. And I ask them to respond to that by giving them all a little card like the ones you see at the moment, and respond to it in whatever way that they want. They can draw pictures if they want to, but thinking about this concept of where are they a local, and what does that mean to them? So this is where I would love to be able to hear your responses to this. So so in the chat today, if you want to, if you'd like to, you could put some responses in there, and I'll hopefully I'll be able to gather more responses from this and be able to become part of the project. But yeah, in the chat, respond to, where are you a local? What does that mean to you? Maybe don't respond immediately. Maybe have a listen to the things that I'm going to talk about in terms of the conversations that we've had during the making of the books. But yeah, I would love to hear your kind of responses. Maybe we can have a discussion about it at the end. I'm also trying to construct a digital space to kind of collect these cards. So I've created this Miro board. So if you would like to have a bit more time with this, or spend a bit more time thinking about how you could respond to that question, I can give you I'm just going to put the link, hang on a second, to the Miro board, if I can find the chat. I've lost the chat. Oh, I haven't. There we go. Link to the Miro board with the password. Hold on a second. We go. So that's a Miro board that I've created with a few of the earlier examples. So if you've got some time, you want to have a think about it, and you'd like to respond and hopefully be part of this that I will be curating and collating at some point in a later date, potentially into some kind of publication, then it'd be great if you could add onto this Miro board. So the Miro is fairly accessible to in terms of intuitive to use. So it should be fairly straightforward, but perhaps do it after the talk today. And it's best used on a desktop or laptop. The Miro app doesn't work quite so well to be able to post stuff. But it's been interesting to read and hear people's responses to this. A lot of people do divert back to kind of the places that they grew up in, or the places that have been significant to them. But I have got a few kind of other interesting responses. One, for instance, you know, where poetry speaks and then sings both soft and loud. You know, somebody that's obviously interested in poetry and writing, that's their local. Others have talked about it being about running, and being in that kind of space. Wherever they run, that's where they feel local. So there's some interesting ideas that I think can be pulled from just these little snippets. So to kind of shape that a little bit, I'd like to now, if I can, read something a little from the first publication. So the first one was this one. Oh, hold it there, that's and as a part of the publication, I wrote a little response that came as a result of the images that the other collaborators kind of contributed to the publication, but also my responses to the things that come up during our conversations as well. So I'm just going to read the little bit of text that comes from the book, just to give you a bit more of a kind of sense of the kind of things that this question could allow you to explore. So being local is entangled with our sense of place, yet it is also where the nuances and complexity of daily life are found and replayed, and where rituals and relationships are formed. Local can be found in those forgotten connections and long lost histories unearthed in childhood homes, and in temporary spaces of recalled rituals and relived experiences. The invisible places where the very chemical composition of the soil beneath our feet tells a very different story, reflecting back to us a portrait of place unlike that seen by human eye. It is in the spaces of familiarity that evoke feelings of safety, becoming our conduits for memory, and in unfamiliar lands where we encounter echoes of familiar textures, colours, and topography. Perhaps simply the local resides within us, in our experiences, encounters, and conversations, and in our habits and routine. In the individual stories and collective narratives gathered here, we find unexpected bonds, common learnings, and mutual recognition of belonging. Rather than asking where you're from, we asked, where are you a local? So that's kind of an overview of kind of where the practice has come from and kind of the ideas that I'm trying to work through, and something that always follows, that is a really kind of integrated part of the publishing, the series of publications, is the little tagline: we invite you to read, unfold, curate, reassemble, and contribute. And I think that really responds to some of these ideas that I've already talked about in terms of it connecting in with social practice and social values, but also the kind of the making and the hand, mind, and connection. So that kind of links me into talking a little bit about the main areas I think that have really shaped what I'm trying to investigate with the research. Particularly kind of areas that might not necessarily traditionally be associated with photobook discourse or photobook research or histories. So I'm going to start by talking about a few of the publications or publishers that have been really inspiring to me and kind of shaping why I started this research in the first place. So this first one is a publication called The Cage, Civil Press, published by IC Visual Lab, who are based in Bristol. So this publication was created in Nepal, and Alex from IC Visual Lab and along with Julian went over to Nepal, and they worked with a group of university students over there, and they created this kind of, they describe it as a kind of like a press room kind of publishing space, and they wanted to gather archives, histories, stories of the local community and the local spaces around them. So they literally went into those local spaces and asked for archives and were connecting in with stories. And they worked together in this kind of workshop space to create this publication that was then redistributed back out into the streets in which they gathered all of the stories and histories and archives. So there was something about this that really resonated with me, partly in terms of that kind of workshop connection with, together they created the work together, but they were also able to learn about each other and learn about like the community and the people beyond that workshop space, to put this publication together. Another publication that was really interesting to me back in 2019, there was a call out for any artists, photographers who make work around the concept of home or homeland to take part in a one-day workshop. And so the publication that you see here was produced in this one-day workshop. They worked with these group of workshop participants. They worked with some photographer practitioners as well as book designer to put this publication together, and they used the kind of collaborative process of discussion around home and homeland to have this kind of discussion around the process of making. And I think that was the thing that was really interesting to me, is that they used the process of making to spark the conversations around the content that they were all kind of contributing to this particular publication. So it was kind of made as a mock-up publication. So I never found anywhere that you could actually buy the publication that they'd made, but they shared it as a PDF download on the website. So you can share, you can download the whole PDF and you can remake the publication with using the materials that you've got available to you. So there's several layers of things that were really interesting in that publication. And then over the years, there's many different publishers that I've become really interested in looking at and working with, hopefully at some point. And one of them is Another Place Press, and they specifically, in their description of what they do, is that they describe themselves as working in close collaboration with every artist that they work with, and that process of that close collaboration is really richly rewarding for both them and also the artist. So there's something within that particular publishing process that had some essence of this social value that I'm exploring. And I think certainly in terms of the small book presses and the smaller independent publishing houses, there is, because of the nature of the space of the way in which they need to work, they don't have the kind of same processes, or they don't have the same requirements as the mainstream publishers. So there's shifts in the way that people can work. There's lots of flexibility of the way in which people can work. And I think that's allowed for much more varied ways of collaboration, of constructing collaboration in making books. So one of the writers that's been has really helped shape my thoughts around, and even in essence kind of confirming some of the things that I was trying to articulate, is this work by Natasha Christia. And she introduces this idea of the photo book as an encounter and an event, and that thinking about the photo book like that, rather than simply being this beautiful object that you are able to kind of read and explore, if it becomes an encounter, and if it has this shift in value to it becoming an event, that it restores this sense of community that is possibly kind of missing in how we experience books. It has this possibility to be a place of exchange as well, that might somewhat be missing in some of the ways in which the photo book kind of world, as it's often described, is often potentially kind of missing or misunderstood or not necessarily recognised. But I think the fact that she kind of describes it as being, if we're thinking about it in terms of an encounter, an event, that it raises the demands on us as makers, it raises the demands on the readers in terms of what they are potentially asked to do and think about with the book. And it shifts kind of our response to what a photo book is and what it does. So I came across this work in my kind of early explorations around socially engaged practice. And it was a book by the socially engaged craft collective called Social Objects. And this is where a lot of the understanding of and the reasons why I keep using this term social object, this is where it's come from. And I think it's probably the shortest little bit of text that I've read throughout all of my research from my PhD, but it's been one of the most valuable in terms of understanding or recognizing something that is really useful in the way that they use these ideas in socially engaged craft. So Namita Gupta-Wiggers describes a social object as something that pushes social interaction into a new space, form, or way to illuminate frameworks of society. A social object must be a conduit for change, whether a small behavioural gesture or a shift in social norm of publication. And one of the ways that I was working early on in my PhD, and I still do it now, but I think in the early part of the process, it was probably the most valuable, was to have field notes where it would just be a space for me to reflect on the things that I've been reading about. And one of the things I wrote really early on was informing a space for collective making. Does the photo book become a social object? And this was one of my really kind of early, maybe not well articulated questions that's really helped kind of channel the different directions that I then started further research. Another project, exhibition and book that's been really useful to me is this book that was associated with a mobile exhibition called World in Transition that was in Germany between, it was in 3 different sites in Germany between 2016 2018. And there kind of, and it was run by the Photo Book Museum. And their kind of idea was to try and get the photo book into spaces that it wouldn't ordinarily be seen within, to try and expand it or reach audiences that wouldn't necessarily engage with the photo book or even understand what a photo book is. And it was one of the, and after the World in Transition exhibition, they produced the book, the photo book in Art and Society. And Ruth Gilberger has said the photo book's qualities are particularly suitable to making the transformative moments in our world visible, readable, understandable, and alterable. And I think there was something really good, interesting about the way that they approached this project, that they had these kind of really kind of social spaces that people could just come and enjoy books, have discussions about books, and also they had workshops as well where you could make your own book. And it was a very different kind of space than anything I'd encountered previously in terms of the way in which photo books were shared with others, you know, either in kind of library spaces or in kind of, you know, more traditional exhibition spaces. So there's lots of different areas that I have been exploring, that some of which are may not be kind of recognized as traditional ways to kind of connect in with the photo book, but I think that for me has been the most interesting and the most useful kind of exploration, to really encounter different areas of creative practice that I wouldn't have explored otherwise, and connecting in with those, into photo book practices. So I think one of the most kind of interesting has been to explore traditional theories of craft and traditional theories of craft process as well. Particularly thinking about that kind of hand and mind connection, which has come from Richard Sennett in his book The Craftsman, and why that's so important to the way in which we think about things, but also the craft processes. So not so much thinking about traditional craft objects and how they are made, more thinking about craft as a process. And as Glenn Adamson kind of talks about, craft as a way of thinking through practices of all kinds. And Howard Rosati talks about it in terms of this kind of connection that craft and craft can bring people together. People are bound together by the creation of craft objects. When you think about things like histories of quilting and histories of knitting and things like that, those kind of social spaces where people would use the process of making these functional objects, that they need for their everyday life, but that process of making and connecting with each other through that. And I think there's something really interesting that can be connected to photo book making and photo book publishing as well. So the making of as well, there's something interesting in there. So the artist book and the histories of the artist books that Emmanuel also talked about a little bit at the beginning of this session today. The artist book has always been this platform for artists to maybe kind of subvert, or maybe they didn't have access to those traditional kind of museum and exhibition spaces. It's been this space for artists to present their work outside of these traditional environments, and kind of work away from the establishment. And so, so the history of the artist book and the kind of interesting ways in which the artist book has emerged, and a lot of that was through a lot of collaborative practices as well, making those connections into photo book practice has been really important. A lot of the PhD framework is based around understanding and concepts of post-digitality. And a lot of the ideas that have come from people like Alessandro Ludovico, who talks about the alchemic intertwining of traditional print with the digital, generating new types of publications and genres. And there's lots of complexity around the post-digital that I think I'm still trying to articulate, about how it kind of relates to post-digital making and how you can connect the traditional theories of craft that I've just been talking about into post-digital kind of concepts and spaces. Making ideas of making and materiality. So particularly work by Martina Margetts, who talks about this idea of mind, body and imagination being integrated in the practice of thought through action. So connecting in a little bit there with kind of Richard Sennett's ideas of the hand and the mind, but this process of making, and why that's important to thinking, how that influences our thinking and thoughts and perspectives on the world. And then, of course, thinking about collaboration in art and social practice. As I've talked, collaborative practices and what strategies of collaboration there are, that's really kind of integrated in what I do in terms of the very much the book practice and approaching different ways of thinking about that. And Maria Lind and her essay, The Collaborative Turn, has been really kind of supportive, certainly early on, in terms of understanding what collaboration is and why it's significant, And she particularly talks about it in terms of alternative ways of producing knowledge, which I think was a really interesting kind of addition to the things that I've been thinking about. So these different areas of research have helped me construct further questions related to the PhD and related to the photo book. So how might traditional theories of craft and making influence and apply to collaborative photo book making in the post-digital? How can the photo book become a social object and encounter? Where or what are the potential spaces of collaborative activation for the photo book? And then thinking of what this might mean for future development of the photo book. How could embracing social and collaborative methods in photo book making and sharing impact the future evolution of the medium? So these are the things that I am currently trying to articulate through my thesis writing. So now I'll shift into talking more specifically about the publications that I've introduced a little bit earlier, so you can kind of see what I've been doing with them and how I've been making them. And so they're all based around this question here, and every group of people or one-to-one that I have is asking them to really kind of consider this question. And as I explained earlier, the first one started with this open call. So through the open call, I gathered 8 other artists in the summer of 2021. So I was influenced by COVID-19, lockdowns, things like that, which is, you know, I had no choice at that time, but actually I think it has also led me to have, you know, introduce very particular practices and ways of working that I wouldn't have done otherwise, which I think has been one of the positive outcomes of it, if there could be any, of the COVID-19 pandemic. So we started to work on Zoom. So initially I started working with each person that responded. I started working with them on a one-to-one basis. And we would talk through the images and the text that they had sent me about how that responded to what they thought of as local and what that meant to them. We also met a few times along the way as a big group as well. So each of those meetings, we would be thinking about design, thinking about layout, thinking about editing, as well as having conversations about this idea of where you're local. We were kind of combining those kind of things together, which I think was really important for me in terms of this process. Because I started off this book, you know, having never done this kind of publication before, it was very much a step-by-step process for me. I was just learning each step as it went along, which felt like the most appropriate step to take. I didn't have a fully defined plan as such, because it was an experiment. It was there to not be too structured and allow that kind of social space to develop. Something I did plan, because I wanted to have some elements that I had some control over, was a little bit about how I would introduce what the publication would look like and how it would work. I structured it to have something to give the participant, the collaborators, so they kind of understood what they were kind of working with and getting into. So something that I structured was the publication is structured by using just smaller than A3 paper folded down into just smaller than A5 sheets. So each artist was given one of those sheets to work with. So so you have when it's folded, you have the kind of external sheets or external pages, as I defined them, and then they have the internal page as well. And so I was working with each artist to design both sides of their sheet. And then when the book comes together as when you collate it as a traditional book, as you go through it, then each of their individual narratives started to merge with everybody else's. And I'll go on to the next page to explain that a little bit more. So these are, as the book was collated, you can see these are all of the different collaborators' works kind of collected together, and their individual narratives kind of combined and connected with each other, which I think was the really nice kind of way in which our conversations, it's a visual representation in a sense of the conversations that we also then had when we were working within the group. So I had this kind of structured concept of the book. I was quite open to that changing if as a group there was something else that felt more appropriate or more more appropriate for the theme. But actually this stuck, and they were all really kind of intrigued actually by the construction of it and the way in which it came together. So some of the different conversations we had really enlightened me, or kind of confirmed for me this conversation around local is, can create many different ideas and conversations. So when I read earlier a little snippet from the book, I talked about this soil, about the earth beneath the feet, and that was work done by an artist called Elizabeth Ransom. She uses soil chromatography, which is the image that you can see on the top right. And so she went and took samples of the little path that she would take to and from her primary school every day when she was little. She went and took soil samples of that path and then represented them through soil chromatography. So a completely different kind of concept necessarily in terms of representing what is local to her. We had Nigel, who was very much came to the conclusion that his local is within himself, his experiences, his memories. He even came up with a formula for what is local, around thinking about what familiarity is, which is in the book. We had one of the collaborators. She travels constantly. It's constantly always traveling. So it's something about travel itself was her local. So we had all these different responses to the theme, and I think the kind of all their kind of various different responses really combined well together in the book once it goes through. So the video on the left is an attempt to kind of represent the way in which you can explore the book, and you can kind of see the different pages and layouts coming together. So the book is unbound, it's just bound with a rubber band, so then you can take it apart. And you can curate it if you want to as the reader. You can have a conversation with others whilst you're curating it if you so wish. And then when then you can kind of put the book back together again, but it can be put back together in a completely different order. So this concept of collaboration feeds through into the reading of the book. And this is where the structure and the concept of the book itself, with the folded pages, the unbound nature of it, has really kind of connected with both the people that I've made the books with, but also the people that have engaged with the book itself. So this whole concept worked really successfully at the time. So I think that's what inspired me to kind of continue with this process throughout all of my different experiments. So the first book was launched at BABE, which is the Bristol Artist Book Event, in 2022. And I think each step of the first publication, like I said, was this kind of step of realization. There was unexpected things that were happening that I was recognizing that have been feeding into the things that I've been analyzing in terms of my research and writing up the case studies. And one of them, which was totally unexpected, but now I think in hindsight was, something very valuable, is so we met up on the launch day, and it was the first time that my co-collaborators had seen the book physically. It's the first time we had met in a physical space, and it was also the first time that they'd seen the book in a physical sense as well. And there was something really valuable within that connection that we all made, and had discussions about the book, and then they could read it, they could unfold it, they could explore each other's images and how they kind of connected together. So that was a really unexpected but very valuable kind of outcome of one of this first book. That connection between, the kind of digital spaces, virtual spaces that we exist within now, but these kind of spaces that we're in here today, and then the shift in between that and the physical space. And I'm not putting a hierarchy between the two at all. It's just that shift in experience that you have. So the book has been selected for a few different exhibitions along the way. One that was soon after its launch, which was Fringe Arts Bath in Bath in the southwest. And it was selected for this exhibition here, the image in the middle. And it was in amongst lots of other artists' books and it was in the space that was very much a white-walled traditional gallery space. And it was interesting, I was excited to have been selected and to be in that gallery space, but it also gave me a point of reflection, and thinking about this activation of the book. So the whole reason for this book is for people to read it, to explore it, to pull everything out of the book and put it back together again. And in a traditional exhibition space, it became inert. I tried desperately. I had 2 copies of it there, as you can see, and I tried desperately to kind of show that you could kind of move it around. But because of our learned behaviors of these spaces, it wasn't interacted with in the same ways as it had done in other spaces and in just conversations with people. So it was an interesting space to kind of reflect on what the book is and what it needs to do in those kind of spaces. Okay. So I then embarked on a second publication later on in 2022. So during the summer of 2022, completely aside from my research practice, I took part in an artist exchange program with Hong Kong, and I was paired up with 2 artists from Hong Kong, Terry and Edwin. And at the end of our exchange program, I asked them if they would like to do a publication with me. So volume 2 of Where Are You a Local, which they agreed to and I'm quite excited by. So I've embarked on the second publication, this time taking on my learnings from the first publication. I've done a few things that were linked and very much the same, other things I did slightly differently. One of the things that was different was that we used Miro, which is an online collaborative space. We used Miro rather than Padlet. For the first one, we shared everything through Padlet, which is a different but more simple online sharing space. This time I shifted it to Miro, which I think was the right choice because it allowed much more flexibility in terms of how we could talk through, share things, and that kind of thing. So we met on Zoom quite regularly. We always met as a 3, and we had some really kind of interesting conversations. But I asked them the exact same question. I gave them very, very the same brief to get them to think about how they would respond to Where Are You a Local. And this is the kind of full Miro board all the way from the beginning of our conversations. We've kind of merged, kind of drifted from top left to bottom right for some reason. I'm sure there's some analysis I could do visually as to why that's happened like that. But it was a really rich, it's ended up a really rich space of exploration of how we've worked through the concept of making the book, but also the conversations that we've had. And this is this kind of digital hand, digital making, digital collaborative space that I am starting to find ways to articulate in this kind of post-digital framework. It also allowed us to share many other things other than kind of images and text. So it allowed us to have we could add videos of little clips and things that were relevant to us. I think one of the other shifts that I did with this publication was, with the first one, I included some of my own work in it as a practitioner. This one, I decided the work was going to entirely be the people that I'm collaborating with. So there's none of my images in. But on the Miro board, I was able to still contribute some of my own work in there to kind of give different layers to the conversations. So yeah, so we're able to use different media as well. Talk about different things, respond to each other. So we could respond to each other through the Zoom calls, but also separately in our own time. We could have conversations with each other back and forth through Miro as well. And we had really kind of interesting conversations that went all in different directions. For instance, Edwin is his main career is in the theatre. I'm working with theatre productions, and so one of his real areas of inspiration is Samuel Beckett's plays, particularly Ohio Impromptu. So he explained and talked through all of that, which was kind of fascinating, because that's not necessarily an area that I've come across myself. And we were also able to add audio files of the places in which we lived. Terry put up some audio of his daughter on the beach, and it's just a really, really short clip, but you just hear the playful noise of a child next to the sea, and it's just something so, just a tiny snippet, but something that gives something extra to that layer of conversation beyond simply the still images that we were talking about. So Terry's work is his response to Where Are You a Local was very much focused on his daughter and the connection that he had with her through the kind of the pandemic and beyond that time. At some point during that, he bought her a little camera, a child's camera, and then he started to make images using that camera as a way to make connections with his daughter, or almost use it as a kind of metaphor for childlike seeing, or making those kind of connections to how she sees the world. And so he produced his response to Where Are You Local were the images he had produced using his child's camera. And so these are those images, and that's why it's got the date and the time on, and the quality's a little bit strange in places. But it really kind of was the representation of his relationship between him and his daughter, and that's where his local was. Edwin's work was very, very different, produced mainly on black and white analog film. And his local was very much about exploring his own headspace or mental health at the time. And he would go out and about in the streets at night near where he lived, photographing, often in quite kind of dark places. A lot of his images are very, very dark, which caused some problems when we came to try and print things. But it was a really kind of interesting metaphorical exploration of his personal kind of space at that particular time, personal experiences. Oh, I'm talking quite long. You can tell me if I need to. I've not got much longer if I need to stop. Somewhere along the line in our process of conversations with Terry and Edwin, they said to me that initially they weren't sure what the question meant, where you were local, because in Chinese there is no translation for the word local, so they didn't necessarily understand what that meant straight away. They didn't tell me this straight away, so I didn't know this for a long time, but I thought this was fascinating, and it only really came to light when we started working out what text they would put on the front of the publication, because we wanted to have obviously the English and then the Chinese translation, but there is no translation. So they had quite an interesting discussion between each other that I was just a spectator of, about what was the best way to represent the concept of what they were talking about. And they came up with, and this all went on Mirror, and they came up with the translation that says "you are which place," but they've said even that's incorrect in Chinese. It wouldn't actually read very well. It would be a bit strange, a bit uncomfortable for Chinese readers to read it, but they like that idea of that strangeness in terms of translating it. So we followed similar idea to the previous one, so it's the same size, and it had it was unbound, so you could unfold it and you could read it in the same way as the previous one, and then you could curate it. But this time we did one artist on one side of the page and the other artist on the other side of the page. And then you could put it up on the wall, you could reorder it, you could work with it in the same way, and you could, if you had both books, combine them together. Something else we did with this one as a bit of a nod to traditional Chinese is you could read it from left to right in our traditional sense, but also you could read it back to front or right to left as well. And so this one was published in 2023 at the Small Publishers Fair in London, but we wanted to do a Hong Kong edition as well, but we took a bit longer to do that one, so we could have a think about what changes we would make to it. So the Hong Kong edition was published and launched in just last September at BOP in Bristol over here, and then they've been doing different things with it back over in Hong Kong as well. So the Hong Kong edition of the book is similar, but has got some subtle changes within it. So inside we've put additional images within it to almost reflect the time between the UK edition and this edition. They also wanted it to be on thicker paper because of the humidity in Hong Kong. And they wanted it presented in this little bag with the stamp on the front. So it's got some changes to it, but it's a nice little pairing along with the UK edition. So in terms of sharing and dissemination and activating the book, I've been to many book fairs with these books, and it's always interesting to see the responses that people have. And it's been interesting to see the responses from people in artist book fairs that are different to people in photo book fairs. And I think the collaborative element of the book and the way in which it's formed, the fold outs, it has always seemed to, the artist book audience seem a lot more familiar and a lot more comfortable with that. The photo book audience are intrigued by it, but they've never heard of that before, never come across that before. And I think that was an interesting kind of comparison to make between the two. But it's been a really useful space for me to explore the book, explain the book to others, allow people to explore the book for themselves and kind of activate it in some way. Through talks as well. I've done talks whilst I've been at these fairs. And then another way that I'm just starting to explore is to use the books in workshop settings. So asking them the question, where are you a local? And they get to use the book and take apart the book and respond to the book in however they want to as a group, to have their response to that conversation. So I've had one group kind of curated the book, as you can see on the top right, and they added their phones in to add their own images in, as well as their responses from the cards. Another group kind of reassembled the book, but added their cards into the book at certain points. So I think there's been some interesting kind of experiments, again, things that I wouldn't necessarily expect people to do. You can never predict kind of how people are going to respond to these things, but it's been interesting to see the different ways in which these books can be activated. And I think for me, something that's really important is that it's making public, but it's also one step on from that. And I think that's the space where there's a lot of potential in the photo book world to kind of activate or recognize a little bit more. Is it activating the book in different ways to bring in those kind of social spaces, social values that I think I am trying to get towards. So I'm kind of pretty much finishing up now. I think I've talked long enough. So these are these kind of final questions that I'm still trying to grapple with, work towards, articulate. Something that's come up this week, really fresh in my mind, so very, very not articulated, is how to think about kind of intention, process, and is outcome relevant within the concepts of these books. So I think I will finish there, because I think I've gone way over time, so I'm very sorry about that.
No, don't be sorry. Don't be sorry. Thank you very much. I didn't have the heart to cut off, because it was so interesting to kind of also get into the depth of the process and the making and kind of the thoughts behind. I just picked up this from my bookshelf, and I was writing notes. I want to hear more books and recommendations, but that was really nice that you offered that in the talk already. And that's, I mean, I think well, myself also, I'm kind of in the trying to articulate some kind of research questions myself for a future PhD application, and really kind of working in the same field. I mean, as you leaning towards the same kind of social aspects of things as you might see when kind of organizing events and stuff like this. So I'm really curious to see how this unfolds and how it's developed, and I'm really happy to see to get some tips also on how to dig deeper into the subject. It was interesting what you said about this in the book fairs, how because of course there is this discussion about the artist book and the photo book, and like and the different terms as we've been talking about also earlier. But it's interesting to then when we have this kind of fairs that has a kind of certain topic, and then kind of it also invites a certain kind of reading in the kind of material that is present. So it was an interesting notion that you had, how the audience is also different, and they have different expectations on what they're seeing in the table, and how they should kind of interact with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the expectations thing is was definitely something that I noticed. I think the conversations about the theme, as in the where are you local theme, were very, very much the same. But yeah, the kind of the fold out, the kind of concept that the reader could become part of the work as well. Yeah, the photo book audience were so many times I've heard, I've never seen that before. That's really fascinating, or some version of that but yeah, not so much from the artist book audience. It seemed a bit more kind of usual. Yeah, so I thought that was quite an interesting thing to reflect on in terms of expectations and things.
Yeah, I dropped off the screen. I noticed that
That's right.
if people won't see anything than the screen. Yeah, and then also with this learned behavior of spaces, and that you
Yeah.
also feel that in the fairs.
It was interesting. We had we were talking about certainly the learned behavior in the exhibition spaces. I've learned that my books are not for exhibition spaces, or certainly traditional exhibition spaces. And also, I think there was a conversation, part of the accessibility conversation you were having the other day at the end of the last talk around kind of libraries and that they provide access. And something I visited the V&A Art Library a few months ago. And initially I was kind of keen to see whether they would accept this in. But I haven't tried it, partly because of my own experiences there. In that if nobody knows your book's in there, your book will probably never come back out. Because you have to request things. You can't just browse. I think artist books and photo books, certainly like mine, because I'm not a well-known photographer or anything like that. People have to know it exists in there. So yeah, I think there's certain types of libraries and spaces that are good and relevant for this type of work, or libraries that allow activities like the things that myself and Matt have been doing with the book house to bring books out of the library. There was that initially there was some discussions that we had to have to be able to get the books out of the library and into a different space for a few days, but they allowed us. They're quite happy for us to do those kind of things now because they saw the benefit of it.
One general question, or maybe I can go back to that. If there's hands up in the air. So was it Emmanuel or Brenny?
It's not me.
Okay, Brenny, you
yes, I raised my hand, yes. but Emmanuel, if you wanted to say something first, please.
No, after you.
Okay. No, Emma, thank you very much for this talk. I thought I really enjoyed the hand-mind connection, emphasizing this, and all this activation of books. I do have a couple of practical questions also, like from the background that, like we at Reflektor, we also had we have actually a zine edition where we kind of had open calls and making this more of a collaborative approach. The thing is actually why it is so difficult, we noticed, is funding. So I was wondering, like the Silvergrass Press and this collaborative approach, it is a huge problem, no?
Yeah. I mean, yes, absolutely. How these things get made in terms of that is definitely something that is in my thought. I think something I've never asked anybody specifically, certainly for the first publication, I didn't ask them to have to contribute anything money-wise at all. I've self-funded, partly because it's part of my PhD research. I've self-funded quite a bit, and then I also get support from the university as well. So I'm in quite a particular position in terms of funding. I think funding is a layer of thought and discussion that I'm yet to get to. I think that will be part of the kind of future kind of direction for my findings for this outcome. But yes, how things get funded is always going to be tricky because everything's got different kind of parameters, and how we can get support for it from other institutions that might have that kind of funding available. Yeah, I don't have any funding answers for you.
Is the print run of your books or the publications? How high is it?
So the first publication, this one, the one that I read from, that is now in its second printing. So first it was 58, and the next one's, the second printing of it is 40. So they're quite small, and that is for me to keep the costs down. And it's the same with the Hong Kong one as well. The Hong Kong one's slightly different because at the moment the Hong Kong artists have funded the Hong Kong printing because it's been printed over there. We've yet to kind of finalize the discussion about how we might manage that. But yeah, so I keep the edition number low because of the funding of it. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Because I also saw somebody else raise their hand, so I'll wait with my second question. But thank you very much.
Yeah, Jana, you can jump in and then take Emmanuel after that.
Okay, well, thank you so much for your presentation. I think the topic of local is really interesting, and it's also quite relevant to me, for example, because I moved from Finland to Germany, and yeah, there are lots of changes, and I think where you're local matters so much because your body is situated there. And so there were lots of thoughts in my head, so thank you. And I have actually 2 questions. I'm just going to ask them, and then you can decide which one you want to focus on.
Okay.
So the first question would be, how did you start the Silvergrass press? Because I think it's also quite like, also if you're doing lots of collaborative projects and also a bit of self-organized publishing in this way, going to art book fairs, how did you decide that it should be this press and it should have a name, and why is it maybe important for you? And then the second question would be, how do you reach out to collaborate with others? Because you had also a lot of these projects, and you already talked about open calls on Instagram and things like that. But yeah, I'm just curious to know.
Okay. I'm probably gonna, if I answer one, I'll forget what the other question is. But the Silvergrass press. So why did I think, like I was saying, in the first year of my PhD, I had no idea what my practice was going to be, and I kept on not knowing what it was going to be, and Emmanuel kept pushing me throughout the first year. What's the practice? And then I think it just made so much sense when I realized that having a small book press as the space in which to be able to publish, because I was looking at independent publishing, I needed to embody independent publishing to be able to experience it and explore what that actually was. So once I realized that, it just made so much sense. Silvergrass just came from, again, I was thinking for a while, I'm just going to stand up a second because I'm going to get something. Came from, I've got this, I really like silvergrass. Oh, I've told it there, so it's not big. I really like silvergrass, and I've just got it dotted all around my house. And so Silvergrass press, that's where it came from. And I like the way when you first pick silvergrass, certainly if I pick it when I picked it, it's all closed up, and then within a couple of hours it's all just exploded out and is really beautiful, and it just lasts as well. I picked this a few years ago and it still looks beautiful. Yeah, so that's where Silvergrass press came from in terms of its name, and then it just made so much sense for it to be the embodiment of what I'm actually looking at. That's what's important there. And then what was the second question? I knew I'd forget it.
It was about how to engage in collaboration and find people to collaborate.
Yeah, I think they've all come along organically at the moment. I mean, there was the open call. I had to structure that one a little bit because I had to get out there somehow. But the second one came through the artist exchange program. The third one that I'm working on at the moment, that came through somebody who I worked with on the first book. So he met the person that I'm working with now. They met Nigel, who I did the first book with, and he recommended me because she is Russian, but she's currently living in London because of her kind of political views and things like that. So we're also having quite kind of interesting conversations about where you are local as well. So at the moment, yeah, they're quite kind of organic connections, and I would hope that I'm able to continue it like that they come from conversations that I've had with somebody, or connections of people that are kind of interested in these ideas.
Yeah, thank you. That was really interesting so to hear. Thank you.
Okay.
Rennie, do you want to ask your question?
Sure. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, about this activating the book, and that you also use it in workshops. I can see that because of the interactive idea or concept of the book, that it actually is very helpful to do it within a workshop. I mean, also again, we at Reflektor, we will be actually doing photo book workshops for children in the fall. We start this. And so I kind of was also wondering if you had any experiences with like how much, like if you have done with younger children, or is it more students, and if you had any experiences with that.
So because I've only done a few workshops, because I'm just experimenting on what the format that workshop is. I have just done it with students so far. My intention is to be able to hopefully get to a space where I can expand it beyond that. So I've definitely not had experience with working with younger age groups with this. So yeah, that would be interesting to see how they would respond. And I'm just wonder, they wouldn't necessarily, there'll probably need to be a lot more exploration and discussion on what I mean by local, because I don't think that would necessarily filter into their, it depends what age they are, but yeah, there would be something different going on there in terms of what they're actually responding to, I think. But yeah, so I don't know how the kind of unfolding and that kind of thing would necessarily work with that kind of age or space.
So, thank you very much. Very exciting project.
Yeah.
Matt. Hello, Matt. I think Matt has his hand raised.
Hello. Yeah, I won't, Emma, I've got like 7 questions, but I'll ask them to you. I won't hog, I won't hog the time here. What I will ask is, you mentioned that when you kind of show this in more sort of photo booky spaces, it's seen as being more novel than perhaps it is in artist book spaces. And I wonder whether you can kind of unpick what is novel about it. Is it more the collaborative element that we don't tend to see in photo book spaces, which often kind of privileges the kind of auteur, or is it something else about what you're doing? And the follow-up to that would be, how can what you've learned be applied to some more traditional photo books, perhaps, or indeed can it?
I think the things that they respond to in the photo book space and find so different is the form of the book, the fact that it can be taken apart and put back together again. But I'm always surprised when people say that, because I've seen examples of that in photo books. So it's not like I've done something brand new. They do exist. But I think it's I think the other main thing is that I say you as the reader can be the collaborator here. How would you respond to it? I think it's those two main things that's come through. I'm sorry, I knew this would happen. Sorry. Yeah, and that's totally made me forget what the second half of your question was, Matt. Sorry. How can that be applied? I don't know whether how it can be applied. I think I think the example, your photo book club is one of those examples of where it can be kind of used and applied to other more traditional photo books. I mean, the problem with more traditional photo books is we are reluctant to take things apart, but we've just done just that, haven't we? With one of our book as things, is that we were given permission to take apart a book and rework it. You know, having a bit more kind of flexibility or with books, so we don't kind of keep them so precious, maybe. But you know, I'm the worst person to kind of say that, because I have all my photo books lined up on my shelf, very precious little objects. Yeah, changing our kind of understanding of it being fixed at a fixed point. You know, once it's published, does that mean it's fully fixed? Could it be taken apart and republished somehow in a different way?
Matt, you have an answer to your question, to your second question.
No, I don't have an answer at all. But I just wonder if, you know, you were talking also, and there was the question about kind of funding, and I wonder whether, you know, is it as much, you could argue that your book, for a lot of people who buy books at fairs, they may never take it apart. But you're producing something which sort of could be used in these two different spaces. One which is kind of your own funding and situation, which means that you can run workshops in which you do take it apart. And then separately, for other people, it's the idea of being able to take it apart, which perhaps is enough. You know, it's the possibility, it's the suggestion of their involvement. So yeah, I don't know, but I wonder whether it does come back to funding and how you can, because what we did, we were kind of allowed to do it and given something. We wouldn't, you know, we haven't done it with our books. Oh, well, I have once, but only once. So yeah, you kind of need that space and that support to be able to do something like that, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't have any further answers for that. Yeah.
Yes, funding is always an issue and will always be in a way. But that's where the collaborative aspects, you know, comes to play. One aspect of that in the artist book world was people were bringing all their skills together and sharing the cost as well.
And I think, I mean, it's just, you know, because what we are producing is, you know, is something that can be sold. I mean, a lot of all of the money I make at the book fairs goes straight back into sitting in a pot ready for the next one. So I think, you know, that's but you need to be able to get an outcome to be able to sell in the first place. So there's, you know, there's tricky things there. But now I'm up and running like that, I do have this kind of income in kind of infrequent moments where I can get more income to then supply for the next book. So that's kind of yeah, part of my funding kind of thoughts that I need to have for myself. Yeah.
Well, Matthew had asked my question. That was my question about what would be the possible reason of the difference between artist book fair and photo book fair. And I don't have an exact answer, but I wonder if it is not, if we think back to José's talk last week and defining the canon, in a sense, the photo book canon up to now and up to Matt's work and other works was really defined within the world of photography by Martin Parr and Jerry Badger in that way. So people at photo book fairs are photographers mainly, maybe a bit less, but still. And photography, you know, by nature has never been a collaborative practice. Neither in the act of making. You have assistants, you have, you know, you have the whole hierarchy, but it's one author. And the same in the viewing experience. And the fact that you have done it also, the photo book fair you took part was the one around Martin Parr again. So this is really in that world of photographers. But people are fascinated, but probably both because it's new, but a bit threatened by it, because that notion of the author,
yeah,
you know, is, so I think that's very interesting. But that's through, your talk was great, you know, as really giving us an example of thinking in practice, you know, to really, through the establishing of your press and the different examples, when you can start to build an understanding and a discourse, and continuing on the discourse that Matt started through his research and other people as well that you have mentioned. So I think this is how, and that's where I would disagree with you with one thing you said, because it's through this kind of process of thinking and making and collaborating and talking like we are doing now that you are defining. You know, history is in the making, you know, day by day and book by book. So the point of archives and collections is not, you know, it's a place where you deposit history in the making for people to go and revisit. So you might think you're not well known enough now, but this is somewhere where people would go and your work will be preserved and will be analyzed and will be kind of connected to other things. So it's very important to sell your work or offer your work to all these collections. And actually, there's a project starting soon and a new book fair at the Warburg Institute in London by Arnaud Desjardins, who is involving the Tate and the V&A and starting a book fair as well. It's not just photo book, it's artist book with a series of talks. And so all these things are connected and they are as important, you know. It's not a linear process. So in that sense, I think it's important to have your books in as many collections as you can.
I think I just got a bit frustrated when I was at V&A because I couldn't get anything. But yeah.
And for all of you either visiting the UK or not, the Tate Library, you know, you can get access. They can be brought to you, but you don't need appointment. You can go there and you can get access to their amazing artist book collections. And there's an amazing study room there, which is open to everybody.
You need to do some traveling at some point. I think it was a beautiful example also here on how, I mean, how the book becomes a tool, and also the whole talk in a way kind of putting the emphasis on the photo book as an invitation, which is, I think, was really, really beautiful. And I think that's a problem that we see with a lot of authors, that they kind of make their book and that's why they want to have a big publisher, because they don't want to interact with the book after they made it. And I think that's quite controversial with the whole idea of publishing and making public, and kind of, I think the whole idea of doing that is to engage with it. So I think that's an essential part that should be addressed when you are thinking, or when people are thinking about making publications and bringing their work into the public. That what does it really mean? It means so much more than just kind of sending it away to the printer and then hoping for the best.
Yeah, and when they do just disconnect with what happens after it, that comes back to, I think Emmanuel mentioned on Wednesday, vanity publishing. I think he mentioned it. It comes back to that it's a status symbol. In some photography spaces, you've got a photo book published. So what?
Yeah.
Yeah, what does that mean? What can it do? What? Yeah, where can that book go?
So I think it's important that we have these discussions and bring it more to the table and question and kind of gather a wider understanding of why the books are made and should be made. And yeah, I remember I was organizing a workshop with Rob Hornstein in Helsinki, and his first question was also like, why are you making a book? and if you can't find the answer to that, then maybe it's better to leave the files on the computer.
Yeah, that's Matt's series of prompts is one of those questions, I think.
Yeah. Well, it's all part of this, you know, whether it's in art or in photography, this consumer society, you know. So why do you make a book? Because you can make a book. Okay, but what is the purpose? So I think what Emma is arriving at now, which was quite recent, this idea of the intention. So it's not just why is it, it's like, why does it have to be a book? What is the intention of the book? Who is it for?
Yeah, that was something I was thinking about also when hearing and listening to the talk, that kind of, did you have on the table kind of different kind of outputs? How did you then decide to okay, like the book is the medium that I need to go for, I want to go for, or was it more about kind of having this, or that was maybe the most accessible or the most kind of area that you were most familiar with, or what kind of drew you to the book as kind of a primary output?
I think because of some of the things that I said near the beginning, because I enjoyed the just making books. I could just do book binding, whether or not they've got photographs of them. I like that process of making, but then also the connections that you can have with people during making, and then I think it just felt the natural thing for me to kind of explore, because it has all the interesting benefits of the making process, but then also thinking, okay, well, how does this connect with the world through publishing as well, through making it public, and what you can learn about people through that process. Yeah.
I think that's why it's very interesting to see the photo book, maybe not relating to photography. It's a container of photograph, among other things, but the connection you make with craft. You talked about quilt making. All these things are made collectively, either on the same objects or on different ones. And while the hands are busy, then the mind is free and is talking and exchanging.
Yeah.
So these are kind of communal and community rituals, which are ancient in a way and timeless. So bring that kind of connection to the forefront. It's not just about materiality and to have a fancy cover and great paper. It's in the act of making, and as a kind of social conduit, as a social bond.
Yeah.
And
then
so,
for me, it's making that same connections, but with the digital spaces.
Yeah, I think for everybody, and that question, what is kind of a digital craft? What is that materiality to something which is digital and immaterial? So I think that's fascinating. Yeah.
So the talk is coming to an end, and you still have room for one question, or if there's something, Emma, you feel like you want to say as an end note, or I think it's been really a beautiful talk and a beautiful conversation we've had, and I'm happy we're recording, so this is good to go back to.
There's two comments in the chat. One from Emily, who's very interested in what you're doing and want to connect because she's designing community workshops using photography in Finland. So Emily Selburn. And José really enjoyed your presentation.
Yeah, and Emma, if people are keen on reaching out to you and want to being in contact, what's the best way to find you?
I could just quickly share my screen again because it's all on there, and people can take a photo or screenshot.
And remind the people, if they want to answer, where you're local.
Yes. Yes. Get that big and see. So yeah, contact details there. silvergrasspress.co.uk is the main website. At Silvergrass Press, that's probably the best space initially. So Instagram at Silvergrass Press, or you can email Emma at silvergrasspress.co.uk if you want to connect up with anything. Yeah.
I can put the mirror board again here, end of the chat. And then
Yeah, and again, yeah,
the
there's
password.
a password. It needs the password too.
Yes, I put it also.
Perfect. Yeah. Yeah, so if anybody wants to take a little bit of time, you can be 5 minutes, you can spend a bit longer if you want. It would be great to have some things on there, whatever, and there's no, whatever you want to put on there, whatever your response would be great.
Thank you very, very much, and thank you to all the audience. It was really nice having everyone here, and we'll kick everyone out of the room, and we'll stay with the organizers for a while and wrap up. Bye bye.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Bye bye.
Bye.